right, guys. Excited to have Fabian here with us. Former Navy officer, bartender, high school teacher, and then he was a personal assistant to Gore Vidal. He's a freelance writing editor, and incredible at journaling, which is I would say that's his special skill. And I know Yannick talked about it earlier today when we kicked off the afternoon segment. So I'm excited to hear this follow up. And I will say, you know, other than Yannick, you're probably the most masterful journaler I've ever met. So, and I'm not saying either one of you is better than the other. You guys are both master journalers in your own right. But excited to hear more about your topic, freedom through self-study and integration, and I'll let you take it from there.
Oh, well, thanks. You might see me. I'm just playing with camera settings here. That helps. Give me a little full screen, figure out how I want to look. Yeah, you just basically first need to see my "Don't Give Up the Ship" shirt, and now I don't have to show that off the rest of the time necessarily, or I can step back if I want you to see it. I'm very much into the, as you said, I was a Navy officer. I went to Annapolis, Naval Academy class '03. I'm very much into the spaceship Earth, mothership Earth metaphor, and certainly the idea of don't giving up the ship. The sad irony of this quote is that it was muttered by a captain in the War of 1812, and then his crew, I think, died, and then his crew did go on to give up the ship. So why the Navy hung on to this is, perhaps too much time has passed to right that wrong, although it gives it. Ugh, I got to be honest, it's never sat well with me that we used this quote when we did give up the ship. What the heck, man? So, hope. Tim, when we were talking about this and discussing me talking, the thing I brought up was, well, I've come to a place in my life where I believe there is no hope, and I was like, that's where I come from when I talk about hope these days, is that there is no hope, that there's only us, there's only ourself. There's like we either going to rely on ourselves or we're not. And then we talked about it more, and I was so pleased with the context you brought in. As I was looking back at the Global Hope Summit website today, and it's talking about hope. I think the first line, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the first line was about trust, right? Hope being trust, and even trust in self. And that is exactly where I would want to go with this. It's exactly where I would want to, how I want to contextualize hope as trust in self. And in fact, what I do really teach people through the mechanism of journaling itself, using the tool itself, and then just in my broader coaching, personal life coaching for people, private client type stuff, or courses that I write. It's all to teach people how to create their own practice of self-study. I'm constantly finding difficulty, right? I mean, I'm having trouble expressing it right now, even though I express it all the time and to talk to you about it. The real art of it to me, again, freedom through self-study and integration. The idea of, instead of just giving someone a path, which is impossible, but can I use journaling? And to me, journaling is just a tool that works for me, that someone would do it, exercise it, put themselves under a lens and go, wow, this is worth it. As a life coach, or as a counselor, as a therapist, as someone who even just volunteers, and as a veteran, I volunteered a lot with veterans who also had trauma. It's constantly a practice of enrolling people in their own deconstruction. People say, what do you do for a living? Sometimes if I'm feeling particularly cheeky, instead of just saying I'm a coach or a consultant or whatever, I say I just enroll people in their own deconstruction. And as arrogant or douchey, frankly, as I might risk coming across saying that, it's also true. It really is true. We're at a time right now, and I know the fact that, Tim, actually, I don't know when your first impetus was for hosting this summit. Was it because 2020 happened and then you were like, oh crap, let's put a Global Hope Summit on? Are you able to? what was the first thought? Like, oh, we should do a Global Hope Summit.
Yeah, actually, so Scott and Dave and I, we were actually in a conversation about helping to raise money for something that Scott was doing at Hope to Haiti.
Right.
And we started talking about an idea for a hope-a-thon, and for some reason, totally unrelated, like right when that word came out of his mouth, I was like, oh man, that's it. Like what the world needs right now more than anything else is hope. And like that was kind of the flash instant. And then from there we started talking about it, and it just ballooned into what we have here. So yeah, but it was just a moment in a conversation.
When was that again?
3 months ago.
Okay, so yeah, all right. So within obviously everything that's happening.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Yeah. All right. Well, great. And I think the paradox of hope is it seems to be something we need most, or people fixate on the most when times are bad, and then it's easier to conceptualize it as something that is self-trust when things are good. Like right, my life hasn't always been good. It's had its roller coasters, like most people. Right now, my life is great, and in the midst of things being really rough for a lot of people, I personally am doing as well as ever. I wouldn't trade places with a previous version of me for. I can't, so it's easy to say, but I get that 10 years ago, a lot of other people were doing fine and I wasn't. So it is what it is. I understand that there's a certain amount of privilege. Some people might call it privilege, that I get to talk about hope in this way, that I get to talk about hope as in, I don't really need hope because I'm fine and I trust myself. Fair enough. I would understand if some people felt that way. And I would also want people to know that I think it's earned. And self-trust is earned, and that self-trust is earned in the most basic of ways, actually, which is courage. And now that I say that, I'm thinking of David Hawkins and the book Power versus Force, which I'll bring up because I think a lot of people do know that book, and it is one of the cornerstones books of modern spirituality, I think, or should be. Whatever, we all have our books we love. He is particularly known, and that book is known. And courage for him, on a scale of emotions, from death and then just pure apathy all the way up to enlightenment, the point at which we switch from victim to feeling like, oh, I don't have control over my environment. I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm scared, I'm grieving. Even pride is not really, it's an emotion people get stuck in because it feels better than everything, but ultimately has taker energy to it. It's courage. It's courage where things really begin. And I mentioned that book because if what I'm saying is of interest, that's where I like to go for that definition of emotions and the kind of a scale of emotions. I like his work on it the most. So hope, self-trust, kind of the same thing to me, but also, just coming from different perspectives, and hope, thinking about it as hope in one way is better for people at certain part in their lives, and then thinking that self-trust is better at other people. And as my friend Nick Meter, who I've been doing his cacao course, I know, Tim, you know Nick, we met him together. I'm drinking some of his cacao right now. So shout out Soul Lift Cacao. Always says, people need different things. Different people need different things at different times. And this is my way of getting around to saying hope, self-trust. When I was coming out of, well, let me back up and talk about that then. Journaling and me. I've been journaling, honestly, my first journal was 1988. I think I was 4th grade. I have it. I can prove it. It's in my it's in my 7-year-old handwriting, and it's at my mom's house on a Nintendo Super Mario's spiral notebook. And not so much through middle and high school, but then when I went to the Naval Academy in 99, 12 days after high school, I did kind of start again. And then certainly started going full speed once I was active duty on my ship, a destroyer called USS Curtis Wilbur, in 2003. So I've easily got 2 decades under my belt, and especially the last decade, just solid, solid, solid. So why is journaling? So as you said, I served in the Navy, I went and bartended, I high schooled, I was a personal assistant for Gore Vidal. A constant in my life was that I did journal through transitions, and that I was able to it's funny, people are like, well, what works for you or what doesn't? It's kind of hard to explain why I did. Why did I have the wherewithal to maintain a journaling practice through times that were so difficult? And any transition is going to be difficult, even a positive transition, even moving into getting more money, buying a new house, getting married and moving in with my wife. That was a positive transition. Even that, I'm journaling. Even when I'm feeling, for me, the moment I had the least hope was a few years after I got the Navy, and I was just angry at everybody. Because my sense, coming out of a very sheltered environment, the U.S., the military, and as an officer especially, I think, yeah, amazing. I get to have this job that people respect me for, and this kind of thing. America felt very disconnected. And I think a lot of veterans express this experience, or maybe more should express this experience, but have had this experience, that it's kind of easy to be in the military. You work hard and all this, but you have your health care, your task, there's meaning in your life, there's clear lines of communication, there's other people who have been trained to have integrity, whether they do or they don't. They don't always do, but certainly more so than your average person you might bump into at the store or something. There's a real sense of belonging, and then to be removed from that, even though I chose to remove myself and had my very clear reasons for doing that, it was hard. And it was hard to think, how am I going to fit into this world? Everyone's disconnected. Everyone seems out for themselves. This is all not true, obviously. There are good people in the world, but that was my sense. And it felt hopeless. It felt like there was nowhere to go. Yet how was it in that deepest, darkest moment? There was still light. There was still a fire. There was still, hold on, I need to check my time here because I'm kind of speaking more off the cuff right now than anything I had planned. I don't know what to tell you, actually. I just did. I do think the people that loved me stayed in touch with me. I do think the people showed me that if I could ask for help, or if I did ask for help, that help would show up. And again, I understand not everyone even has that. So constantly trying to probe and inspire people at their level of curiosity. What are you curious about? What are you curious about? And then have people be curious about themselves. And I think here I have Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, which well-known Holocaust survivor, right? Survived the camps and speaks about how it seemed the people that were surviving somehow just were able to maintain some level of hope and outlook for better things to come. And those seem to be the people that were surviving. I mean, he says a lot more than that. And he's obviously, I need to reread this book. It's been a while. And then another book that kind of covers this that's not going to be as well known. Well, any writing by this guy, Jim Stockdale. And I don't know, maybe my lighting's off, but it says Thoughts of a Philosophical Fighter Pilot. And I'm familiar with this because Admiral Stockdale was a Naval Academy graduate. You know, when I was a midshipman, he was old and would speak. Viktor Frankl, it's kind of easy to look at, very pure victim, you know, Jew thrown in the concentration camps. It's easy to be like, wow, it's a very pure victim. We look at it that way. Admiral Stockdale commanded a fighter, you know, a carrier-based wing during the Vietnam War, which is an unpopular war. And it's very easy to be like, well, yeah, this guy and then was thrown in a POW camp. That's where this is going. So it's a little more difficult, I think, for some people to look at Stockdale and be like, well, you know, he was out bombing other people. Perhaps he shouldn't have been bombing in the first place. I get that. I get why people feel that way, for sure. But he got thrown in a POW camp for 7 years. So here's Viktor Frankl, Admiral Stockdale, in situations of seemingly no hope, and yet they come back to us with these stories of perseverance and courage in the face of absolute darkness. And they come to us with the insights, the golden insights we wish we could have. Now, we don't all need to go throw ourselves in POW camps and concentration camps to mine. Well, that's kind of the question, right? Do we need to throw ourselves into POW camps and concentration camps and horrible experiences to realize the depth of the power of hope and courage and hanging on and trusting something deeper within ourselves? I say no. It would be pretty dark to think otherwise, first of all, but because of people who have survived such deep trauma. And it could be your neighbor who survived rape. It could be your neighbor. I'm someone's neighbor, and I was in the military and didn't have a good time necessarily. You know, the people around you, you just don't know. Does that make just because their lessons are somehow less, insights are somehow less glamorous than being a Holocaust survivor, or less glamorous than being a fighter wing commander and surviving BOW camp? And for those of you who are into Stoicism and have not read Admiral Stockdale, you need to read Admiral Stockdale. Because this is a guy who only died recently, kind of a contemporary example of a person who really relied on Stoic philosophy. Right? A lot of people go back all the way to Marcus Aurelius. Well, we got a guy even more recent than that I find as impressive. So, freedom through self-study. These men that I just showed you, Stockdale and Frankl, studied themselves. I mean, Frankl was in fact a psychologist or psychiatrist. I mean, he was already concerned with the condition of consciousness and the psyche. And Admiral Stockdale was an amateur Stoic and studier of philosophy before he got shot down over Vietnam. Both of these men went into their trials by fire, into their darkness, armed with philosophy, armed with their principles, armed with a real deep sense of self. That's why I teach journaling. We see how powerful knowing ourselves and knowing our philosophies. Marcus Aurelius would say that his journaling practice, that is published in a book called Meditations, again, very, I think, well known actually. But look up Meditations by Marcus Aurelius if you haven't. You are essentially reading you are literally reading the journal of a Roman emperor who says things like, fighting for my philosophy, constantly fighting for my philosophy, constantly fighting for my philosophy, fighting for my principles. And that comes from, to me, it begins at courage. How can we keep people courageous? How can we keep people curious? How can I who teaches this, show people that it's worth it to care about deconstructing yourself? Whew, okay, any questions there? I know I'm going to shift gears a little bit. If this is a good place to stop.
Run with it if you got.
Well, no, I got more. I was going to shift gears a little bit, but I want to just, if there's anything that coming up for you as I talk about Stoics and fighting for philosophy and
yeah, I'm a huge fan of Stoicism, as you know. I think it's really incredible to approach life with, a look from the place of what I feel like is this observer quality, where you're really taking a look at it. And I think that's what you do, what you're doing in journaling. So, yeah, I don't really have any specific questions. Would just love to hear what
Yeah,
your philosophy on deepening
sure.
this self-study.
So, so to be clear, I use journaling because it works for me, and I love it because it's so human.
Mm,
You're right. It's just writing,
right.
and by hand. I do make a distinction about writing by hand. It's such a human activity that ties together mind, body, and emotions. The emotional quality, I believe, enriched by the fact, well, obviously, you're bringing attention to things about yourself that are not discomfort or are not comfortable potentially, but also that you're writing slowly. So journaling facilitates this clarity and presence and mental alertness that yoga also would. Breathing exercises can. Tapping it. My wife did the tapping thing yesterday. EFT, emotional freedom technique. These techniques promote mental alertness during some kind of stress.
Mm,
In yoga, it's the stress of pushing your body to its range of motion limits and strength at the tips of its range of motion. EFT, we're purposefully talking out loud about things that disturb us as we use the tapping to keep, as we use the tapping to keep ourselves present and mental alert. Same thing with the journal. You're writing about something, and if I design my courses to push people and be like, hey, what about this thing about you that's not so pleasant? What about this thing that's not pleasant to you? I generally just wait for clients to tell me what is not pleasant to them, and then I push. So obviously, pre-sell and is very important, and taking the types of clients that are open to this in the first place. As a business, for me, that's the art of it. I got to find people that are willing to go there and understand that's what they're getting themselves into. And I think I'm getting much better at that. Right? I'm not just consent is definitely important.
Yeah. So I know you talked about Viktor Frankl and finding meaning and sort of these tough times, and I know for you. That even when you journal, it's like it's deepening that connection to that emotion, like you just talked about. It's like putting pressure on that emotion, right?
Yeah.
So almost, so it's almost like you're exercising the part of you that allows you to build um, to build more fortitude. So how would you describe how using journaling as a practice has helped you build more fortitude in the face of crisis? And do you think that that's a way to substitute, something like having to go into a concentration camp? I realize that's a very big
Well, I think
question.
for sure. I think we're all dealing with enough stress these days anyway, which is why I was talking about, like, when did it occur to you to do this? There's a general stress on humanity itself
Yeah.
that has never existed before. And if it did, we weren't self-aware of it. But now there really is a collective stress that is just kind of existential in nature and also just very literal in the form of climate change, perhaps, and COVID and diseases, and there's lots of people around right now, and what's going to happen? It's not so pleasant. So how does me looking at myself give me strength? That was your question, right? Well, I realize I'm getting a little lower on time here, or quite low on time. Where I was going to go originally was with the yamas and niyamas. So I'll at least throw this book up right now from Yoga and Deborah Adele. Deborah Adele's version is one I'm highly going to recommend. And so the yamas and niyas are yoga's ethical system, right? Most people think of yoga, I do a pose, it's a physical exercise activity somehow. but it's a whole spiritual system, and this is the ethical practice of it. So yama means restraints, niyama is observances. And so there's 5 of each, 10 total things. One of them itself is called svadhyaya, that's the Sanskrit. That is self-study. So part of even yoga is where freedom, self-study, I got that from and where that comes from. To literally say freedom comes from self-study is yoga. Well, yamas and niyamas is where it's introduced to me. And my mom sent me this book when I was at a low point in my life. And I wasn't even on that good of terms with her, and she had the wherewithal to send this to me. So self-study is to peel back the onions. What are the masks, personality being a mask itself? What are the masks we wear, the belief systems we box ourselves in that affect how we interact with our environment? And understanding that these boxes we put ourselves in, these belief systems we wrap ourselves in, this personality that we have ourselves wrapped in, assuming they assume there's something real pure and essential inside of us that is masked, and that the process of self-study is peeling back the onion. Why is that so powerful? Because then I'm less. This is where I was going to share a screen, but we're probably too low on time. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We then can take control, because something our ego really wanted up front, to feel safe in this world and to feel secure and not have to rely on hope. Because we're trying not to rely on hope. We're trying to rely on the fact that we actually are safe and secure and in control. But there's a contrived way to get to that, which the ego does. And then there's an honest way that seems to come out of extreme experiences where, like, they didn't choose to be a POW. They didn't choose to be in a concentration camp. But since they were there anyway, we have people who stayed present through those experiences and mined the gold for us and have written about it. We can do that for ourselves in our everyday life, so that in the moment of our life, as things are coming at us, instead of purely reacting to things, the self-study brings an awareness to choice. I can feel my ego impulses acting on me and wanting me to do a certain thing that was automatic and habitual in nature, not neighbor, in nature, or because of my self-study and I've pulled back the layers, I can see what the true, real, authentic, essential, pure piece of me wants to do in a situation. And that's the choice that takes courage at first.
Right.
Awesome. So courage and a willingness to look at ourselves builds that muscle and builds that strength. So we eventually realize for ourselves, oh, this is what I want anyway. This is actually better, and this is what I want. Yeah.
We kind of build what we think we want one thing, we get something else, find out, oh, that's actually what I wanted.
Yeah. And there's a certain amount of pain that goes along with actually getting what we want. Right. And that's why I'm constantly trying to enroll people into deconstruct themselves.
Right.
We all have to see for ourselves, oh, the courageous path, the path that has some real pain associated with it, actually is better. And to me, there's a lot, when you do keep choosing this courageous choice, you keep building your trust in yourself. And then hope is much easier to access because you do trust yourself. Yeah. That's my experience anyway. I mean, the yogis wrote about it. Admiral Stockdale wrote about it. Viktor Frankl wrote about it. I'm not claiming to be original at all. But I did, for some reason, was able to stick with the journaling practice through the tough times in my life. And now I can look at all these people and all these teachings and be like, I get it. In my bones.
Cool. So, let us know real quick, where can we find out more about you and your work, and how you're using journaling to affect freedom in people's lives?
Yeah, well, I'm in the middle of doing my website, which Dave's helping me with, but I would go to my personal Facebook page, Journaling to Wholeness Facebook group, or intuitiveintegrity.com. And you get on my mailing list, or intuitiveintegrity.com /destiny, which is where I have a course called Journaling to Destiny now up and available. So
awesome.
That would be that's the kind of intro to introspection where in 1 month I aim to create that experience for someone. Oh, self-study and peeling back the onion is making me feel more courageous and willing to step into action.
Yeah.
That's it.
Awesome. We really appreciate you coming on here. It's been great having you and hearing about, and I always love how you break down these things historically and, in the context of what's come and the people who've come before us. So it's really incredible. And to everybody watching, we're going to start the third live stream here with our final talk of the night, which is Patrick Combs, and really excited to have him on here. And cool. We'll see you guys here in a few minutes. Thanks, Fabian.
Thank you, Tim. I can never stop on time for you. I'll work on it.